We'll be doing an in-depth match analysis of one of the games at the last round of the top tables of the offline regionals at CoreTCG that happened on October 4th, 2025. So we'll be going over the match specifically between the 5th place player, Magda, who played Red Kenshin. And if you don't already know, the main idea of the deck is that all Red Kenshins cannot sideline opposing cards. When the cards win a battle, the card effectively gets pushed into the back line, the energy line, and your opponent must choose a card to place in their removal pile if their back line is full. And this game will be between the 9th place player, Navi, who piloted Purple Saito. The main idea is that the 6th cost Hajime Saito can attack from the back line, and if he moves from the back line, he gains snipe. So without further ado, we'll be starting the game. So on the left, we have our Purple Saito player going second, and on the right, we have our Red Kenshin player going first. So he starts off by playing a 0-cost step card in the back line. So note that here, it would have been maybe a good idea to play in the front line because there's no negative in doing so. And also it puts your opponent in a bit of an awkward situation since they might want to play a card in the front line to block if they don't want to take 1 damage. But it doesn't really matter here because the Saito player plays the fake 0-drop, the 2-cost Saito in the front line with 2500 BP, and then he plays the Searcher Kenshin in the back, which can discard a non-affinity purple card into the sideline. So now even if the Red Kenshin player had played his step card in the front line, he couldn't attack because the Saito player has an effective blocker with 2500 BP. But note that because you're playing against Red Kenshin, any blocker is a free block in the front line if your back line is not full. So now the Red Kenshin player played the 1-drop Searcher that allows him to look at the top 3 cards to add any one Kenshin Himamura card to his hand and then to discard 1 after. Now the hand of the Red Kenshin player is a little bit clogged because it seems like he has 2 AP restand cards and 2 specials. And he chooses to discard the AP restand card, Oath Not to Kill, and note that this card can later be banished for the Psycho Kenshin card, and he finishes just by playing a 0-drop 3000 BP Kenshin into the front line as a blocker. So the Purple Saito player chooses to play the Searcher Saito that pretty much allows him to search for any character in his deck among the top 3, and he chooses to bottom deck all the cards. Note that this is not ideal because even if the card that you want is not a card that you want to add to your hand, you can still discard it and that can serve as fodder for your purple color triggers. So he continues by playing the 0-drop Kenshin that allows him to look at the top card and discard a card into the sideline. And note that the card that you choose to discard is important not just for filtering purposes, but also for setting up your sideline in case you hit a purple color trigger from life. So he chooses to put all the cards onto the top of the deck. So here an alternative play is actually to play more aggressively by pushing your cards into the front line and then playing those 2 cards in the back line anyways, because you can get an attack in, and if your opponent, specifically Red Kenshin, tries to attack you, your cards just go into the back line anyways, so that you have the energy to play your cards next turn. But here now the Purple Saito player has to pass because he can't get over the 3000 BP Kenshin. So the Kenshin player plays a Searcher Kenshin that allows him to look at the top 3 cards for any Kenshin card, and then he has to discard after. So he adds the Psycho Kenshin to his hand, which is the 4-drop 2 action point Kenshin. And he chooses to discard the special, likely because he has another one in hand, and he plays the 3-drop Kenshin with 4000 BP in the back line, and he plays an Oath Not to Kill, the AP restand card. And now with his last 2 AP, he plays the Psycho Kenshin onto the field, which comes active, and allows him to draw 1 and discard 1 card. And notably, by banishing the AP restand card, it allows him to draw a card, and turn off the pacify ability of his Red Kenshins. So here, the Saito player pretty much has to take the first attack in case it is a good trigger, and he hits an active trigger which effectively blocks the second attack. So usually the Psycho Kenshin 2 AP card is used more as a finisher with its nullify pacify ability, but the Red Kenshin player effectively doesn't have any raids in his hand, so he has to play this way. So now the Purple player plays the 3-drop Hajime that generates 2 energy, but also has the neat little trick of pushing up a character from the back line to the front line when played. And now he plays another 2 energy generator, giving him effectively 6 energy. And he plays his AP restand card, giving him 1 extra AP. And now he plays the raid 6-drop Hajime into the back line, and he plays the 4-drop Hajime into the front line, rested. And now he attacks from the back line, gaining snipe while already having impact, and note that it has to attack from the back line to gain snipe, and thus he deals 1 damage with impact. And the red player gets a get trigger. So note that the 6-drop Hajime only gains his ability to attack from the backline or snipe on the turn it is played, so on the next turn it will not have those abilities. And now the Saito player attacks with the baby Kenshin with 2000 BP. And the red Kenshin player should effectively block now with this 3000 BP character because the 2-drop Hajime has the ability to gain BP. And it chooses to block, and on the last attack, the 2-drop Hajime bounces his 6 cost to his hand, going up to 4000 BP. And the red Kenshin player hits a final trigger, which does nothing. Now the big question is, should the purple Saito player have bounced his 6-drop into his hand? Yes, he gets it back to be able to replay it to snipe again from the back line, but he loses a card on the front line, which could have been a character that can block an opposing attack. Note that the purple Saito player is a bit low on cards since he only has 2 cards in hand, so he might have been thinking that he needs more resources to be able to get the win. So here the red Kenshin player pushes up his 2000 and 4000 BP Kenshins from the back line, and he plays a 2-drop Karu onto the back line, generating 2 energy given that he has a red Kenshin on the field. And with his second AP, he chooses to raid the pushback Kenshin that has impact and pushes back a card from the front line to the back line. And he chooses, of course, to push back the 4000 BP Hajime. He uses the activate main ability of the Karu to protect his newly played raided Kenshin. And this forces your opponent to discard a card if they want to choose that Kenshin for abilities up until the end of their turn. And for his last AP, he plays down a 0-drop Kenshin. And now he chooses to attack with a Nullify Impact 4000 BP Kenshin. So it is blocked by the 2000 BP Kenshin, and that goes into the backline, and one of the previous backline cards is placed in the removal pile. And note that the card that just blocked should be rested in the backline because all cards become rested before they block. So now the 3000 BP Kenshin swings, and it is blocked by the 2500 BP Hajime. So note that if your opponent still has attacks available to them, you should never leave your front line empty by blocking, because you can always hit an active trigger in your life to be able to block an attack. But note that the Saito player still is at 6 energy, so he can always hit and raid from life. And here we see the misplay in action because he actually gets an active trigger, which would have blocked an incoming attack. And he hits a get trigger, adding to hand. So note, there are merits to blocking, just not when your backline is full. You can block versus a red Kenshin player when it allows you to get enough energy to be able to raid on your opponent's turn from life. So note that the red player actually attacked in a bit of a funky way since he used his 3-drop to attack first, where his 4-drop was his best card. So the purple player pushes up the 4K Saito from the backline, and the color trigger 2-drop one from the backline also. And he plays the 4-cost 2-action point Kenshin with 4000 BP that allows him to play the 0-drop Hajime for free. And this 4-drop Kenshin comes inactive. And he plays the 0-drop Hajime onto the front line to act as a blocker, especially given that his backline is not full. So he swings with the 4K Kenshin, and then Kenshin player should always take this damage, and it reveals a draw trigger. And he swings with the 4K Hajime. And now is a more interesting decision to block or not, because the red player can always chump block with a small Kenshin, and that gives him 2 empty board spots to play cards next turn. But he chooses to take the damage, and this can give him more resources. And funny enough, the purple player chooses the card at the end of the pile, which allows him to hit a draw trigger. And the purple player passes because his 2-drop Hajime can't get over his opponent's cards unless he bounces a card to his hand. So now the red player plays the 4-drop raid Kenshin, that is the double attack Kenshin that draws a card when played. And he plays another raid card, which is the 4-drop pushback Kenshin. And he chooses to push back the 4K Hajime. And next he chooses to play the 2-drop protection Karu, using its ability to protect the double attack Kenshin. So it's definitely a good idea to protect the double attacking Kenshin, because it is his best card right now, and also the protection works on opponents' special triggers from life. Now the red player chooses again to attack with the 3-drop Kenshin with 4 KBP, and I don't really know why, because if your opponent hits a special trigger, they will always target one of their raid Kenshins to knock out. Now the purple player again chooses to block early, and I think this is a misplay, mostly because the red player has 5 attacks, while the purple player has 3 blockers, so the purple player should at least let one attack through to be able to get a helpful trigger. So now the red player is actually helping the purple player by attacking with the impact first. This allows him to force 1 damage. And this is why you take those early damages, because you can get a potential helpful trigger like the special trigger. And now the red player discards a card from hand to be able to double attack, and he discards the hit 10 Mitsurugi, allowing him to draw a card. And again, the purple player blocks early, because if you're going to take the damage anyways, you should always take the damage first in case you hit a trigger. And now the Saito player hits a purple color trigger, which allows him to summon from the sideline active onto the front line a card with 2 or less energy. And he chooses to play the Searcher Hajime that allows him to look at the top 3 cards. And what he's mainly looking for is another 6-drop raid to be able to get the tempo back. But unfortunately, it looks like he whiffed because he's bottom decking all 3 cards. So the purple player chooses to AP draw, really looking for that 6-drop. And note that he still has the 6-drop that he bounced earlier in the game, but he really needs 2 to be able to snipe the 2 raid cards on his opponent's field. So he moves to the front line, the 4K Hajime that keeps on getting pushed into the back line. And he plays a 2-drop Kenshin into the back line. And now he plays with his last AP, the 6-cost Hajime into the back line, with it already having impact, but also gaining snipe. And of course, he moves it to the front line to be able to snipe one of the raid cards, and the biggest decision of the game is to pick which of the raids to knock out. And because the purple player doesn't have any nullify impacts on his field, both raids are pretty much the same thing because they will deal 1 damage to him. And he chooses to snipe the impact Kenshin, dealing 1 damage. And this pumps up one of the Kenshins to be able to block a 4000 BP character. So the red player is taking this damage because he only has 2 characters to block. And this reveals a non-trigger card. And finally, the 2 remaining red cards can block the 2 remaining purple cards. So now the red player is definitely at an advantage because he only really needs 1 or 2 raids to be able to finish the game. So he chooses to move up both of his smaller Kenshins onto the front line. And he still has 4 energy thanks to the 2 Karus. And he's playing a Searcher Kenshin to hopefully dig for what he needs. And definitely unfortunate for the purple player because he hits the double attacker raid. And he discards a useless card in hand. And now the 4-drop double attacker Kenshin comes in, allowing the player to draw a card. And the win is pretty much secured because the red player has 6 attacks, but to add insult to injury, he uses a special to bottom deck one of the purple player's cards. And now the first attack of the double attacking Kenshin comes in. And again, the purple player chooses to block early, which is a bit unfortunate because if he is able to hit a special trigger out of life, he can knock out the double attacking Kenshin, which would prevent 2 attacks. And now the other double attacking Kenshin attacks for the first time. And the purple player chooses to block. And now the nullify impact 4K Kenshin attacks. And I really think at this point the purple player has to take the damage or he's going to lose the game 100%. and he hits a 6-drop Hajime raid card. And note that when this card is raided, it actually goes up to 5000 BP. So when you do it on your opponent's turn, you can actually block one of your opponent's attacks. So now the purple player can actually block 2 attacks, but he still only has 2 blockers to his opponent's 3 attackers, and he's forced to take that final damage, and he loses if this is not a final trigger. And it is not a final trigger, giving the red player the win. So all things considered, this was actually a fairly close game between the purple Saito deck and the red Kenshin deck, but I think that there were some misplays on the purple player's end that could have given him the advantage, despite being on the back foot the entire game. It's also very important to say that the purple player never saw more than one of the 6-drop and also never got to play any of the 4-drop raid cards. And note that the red player never actually got to play down their 3-drop Kraru that allows them to draw a card every turn if they have not sidelined an opposing card that turn. So note that this is me doing my analysis, definitely not in a stressful tournament environment, so that I would say that these players definitely played well given their situation and given that they were playing at the end of a very long day. Alright, thanks for watching, and like and subscribe for more videos.